This is KPTZ 91.9 FM, Port Townsend, Washington, eclectic, authentic community radio. You're listening to Boat Talk. And your host today is Peter Guerrero, and with me are Captains Crawford and Captain Marmol, who are here as part of the first training of the Crawford Academy's partnership with the Northwest Maritime Center. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hello.
I'll start with Andy.
Yes.
If you could tell me a little bit about the partnership with the Northwest Maritime Center and how you see that, what that's all about, and how you see it unfolding.
The Northwest Maritime Center here has a wonderful simulator with Transys, and our school is professional training for maritime personnel. And the simulator affords us an opportunity to teach the more advanced classes like electronic charts and some of the automatic radar plotting aids, and also to do some simulation here as well. So it extends our ability to teach to more modern equipment, as opposed to previously, which would have been the manual labor, pen and paper sort of stuff. So it's great.
So we here who live in Port Townsend constantly see the ship traffic right off the strait here, big cargo ships, big cruise ships, everything in between, tankers, I guess, and you name it. And those boats are only getting larger, apparently, and the skill required to navigate them through the narrow passages sometimes of the Puget Sound is challenging and requires all sorts of new skills and new talents. So, Ed, I understand you are here to help introduce those, the new software, the new hardware associated with what pilots need to know and use today to navigate the Puget Sound safely.
That's correct. I'm one of 53 Puget Sound pilots that brings in and takes out the larger ships that call on Puget Sound. We do the cruise ships, the tankers, the container ships, the bulkers that you see passing by Point Hudson and Point Wilson here northbound and southbound. And over the years, the ships continuously get larger. The waterways stay the same size. Going down into the Grand Alliance is now going down into Tacoma through a 2-mile waterway down to the Pierce County Turning Basin, the Washington United Terminal. The ships are getting larger and larger. They've recently asked us about bringing in 13,000 TEU ships. We routinely do 8,000 TEU ships, and now occasionally we're getting 10,000 TEU ships going into the Port of Tacoma. With the advent of 13,000 TEU ships that they're conducting feasibility studies on right now, we have to look at what technology is out there to help pilots do their jobs. We have a next generation portable pilot unit that is a tool, just one of many tools that we use in guiding ships through the waterways. And we're here with the Crawfords this week to help set up the school that will train pilots in the use of this advanced technology.
So, Ed, you're talking about how boats are getting larger and larger and larger. Could you give our listeners a sense of the scale and magnitude of that?
Certainly. Well, a large ship used to be 900 feet long, 3 football fields long. That was a good-sized container ship. But now we're bringing in ships that are 1,100 feet long, and with the feasibility study regarding the 13,000 TEU container ships, they're going to be 1,200 feet long. That's over 1,200 feet long. That's 4 football fields long. So that gives you an idea of the immensity of these ships.
And I gather that the nature of the profession today is not too different from being an airline pilot. You can look out the window, but it's really not going to help you.
Well, to an extent, that's very true. Just as aircraft have gotten larger over the years, ships are getting larger and larger. Looking out the window is not the only answer anymore. You can look out the window after the ship and just see a wall of containers. So you don't have an accurate sense of where your stern is because you can't see it. All you see is a stack of containers that towers over your head. And looking forward, you can see over the stack of containers, but your perspective is such that you cannot tell exactly where the bow of the ship is.
So the software is key to GPS, and that gives you a more precise reading of where you are when your visibility is limited.
Well, on the software screen itself, there's a Doppler screen with an arrow showing the bow starting to trend to the port or starting to trend to the starboard, and an arrow on the stern. So you have a silhouette of the ship that you can see. And you also have predictors that show where the ship is going to be in the future. Those are tools that a pilot can use in addition to looking out the window, in addition to looking at the radar, in addition to looking at the ship's ACDIS.
So being a pilot is a little bit different from what most people romantically imagine. In the past, you would go out on maybe a pilot boat, a schooner, and you'd climb up a rope ladder and you'd get on a vessel and you kind of steer it into port because of your knowledge of the topography and the bottom of the body of water that you're navigating. Today, describe what the life of a pilot is like today. What is it like to go out and to meet a boat? How do you get out there? How do you get on the boat? And what's it like to take a vessel like a large container ship that you can't see over the top of the containers into the port of Tacoma or Seattle?
Well, parts of the job are the same as they always have been, but the tools continue to evolve. We have a pilot station at Port Angeles. We have a pilot boat that's no longer a schooner, but has twin jet drives on it. So it takes you out to the ship. We meet the ship off of Edda's Hook as it comes in from wherever it may come from. A container ship may come from Alaska, typically Asian ports. The pilot boat will take us out there. We'll go to the side of the vessel, rendezvous with it, and we still climb up the ladder up the side of the ship up to the main deck typically, and we get escorted by the ship's crew up to the bridge of the ship. There we greet the captain. There's an exchange of information where we get an update on the capabilities of the ship, make sure that everything that's supposed to be working is actually working. Then we guide the ship. We don't actually put our hands on the throttles or the ship's wheel, but we'll give the helmsman courses to steer all the way to whatever port we're going. I'll use a container ship going to Tacoma as an example. We'll leave Port Angeles, make the turn at Point Wilson, continue south through the traffic lanes. We'll have to slow down as we go by Seattle. The ships have gotten so large that at high tide they throw a pretty good wake, so we have to reduce the ship's speed to keep the wake under control. Then we meet our tugs in Commencement Bay just outside of the harbor. We'll get the tugs hooked up, and then we'll start the transit down the waterway, typically entering the waterway between 3 to 4 knots, getting the speed below 4 knots as we're going down the waterway on the largest container ships. Then we'll guide the ship to whatever dock we're going to, whatever pier in the Blair Waterway, breast alongside with the tugs, and get the lines across, and then disembark the vessel.
That's a lot, and a lot to ensure that it's done safely, I gather.
Well, it's a challenging job. It's very satisfying. As the ships get bigger, you have a much smaller margin of error. And so we are continually working to minimize risk, and we're here this week to make sure that we have the best available tools to help us do our job. And with the help of the Crawfords, we'll make sure that our group gets trained to the current state of the art in the piloting profession.
Well, let's go back to Andy Crawford and talk a little bit about the Crawfords and the Academy. And for the listening audience who don't know what the Crawford Academy is, maybe start with the real basics of that.
Well, it's just a family school. We call ourselves Crawford Nautical School. My family's run it for years. Most of us have gone to sea, my brothers Tom, John, and myself. Through that, we gained the experience. In many cases, Tommy and Johnny sail as ship's masters. In my case, I was a ship's officer, so very much my role would be to support pilots like Captain Marmol when he came on board. Our training has gone back, 1923 or so been around it a while. And we were able to use our onboard experience to help understand the equipment and how the pilots might apply it. Captain Marmol makes it sound straightforward, but one has to respect the responsibilities that he has when he comes on board. He's a valuable addition to the bridge team on board, and he's in some ways he can feel very much alone as a pilot because he comes singularly on board, and he really doesn't know all the time what he can expect on board. And equipment like this gives him a secondary decision-making tool, aids in his ability to verify positions and safely bring the ships in and out of port.
So I understand he's coming with his own equipment on board that gets plugged into the ship's bridge. Is that correct?
And the ship, today's vessels have automatic identification systems that transmit the vessel's information. That information will be accepted by his pilot port unit, and then he has an independent GPS, a global positioning device, that gives him an independent position as a secondary benefit to the ship. So it's a double check. And with the equipment today, he can use it to better aid his navigation. As the ships get larger, his job gets more and more difficult because of, as he stated before, the channels are no larger. Dredging is dependent upon funding, and so the depth of water is also restricted. And with earlier on, you asked about a TEU, a 20 equivalent unit, and when Captain Marmol describes a 13,000 TEU ship, that means that's 13,000 20-foot containers. That's a lot of containers. It's probably a train of 5-6 miles in length if you connected them all together. So the size of his vessels the vessels he services are becoming much larger, and therefore the need for additional equipment to help him. Our role is simply to use some of our experience, some of our teaching ability to help communicate to the pilots how the unit might work and some of the error trapping necessary to serve their purposes effectively.
And so this is the first training that the Crawford Academy is offering here in Port Townsend. Where do you go from here?
Electronic chart. It's abbreviated ECDIS, Electronic Chart Display Information System. The industry is having now much more electronic equipment as opposed to paper charts, and that transition means that those of us that look at electronic charts have to be able to interpret them correctly. Most of the concerns that you have is failure to interpret the information correctly. And so a lot of these equipment, radars and the automatic radar plotting aids, make the mariner's job on board easier, but there's the risk of failure to recognize the information that's being delivered and when it is an error. So once again, I think that, as Captain Marmol said, you still have to look out the window. This equipment gives you a better edge in anticipation of what's happening. And so it will continue to be a marriage between electronic equipment and old style looking out the window.
And speaking of marriages, the marriage between the Northwest Maritime Center and the Crawford Academy, this is just the beginning of these types of training events for professional mariners, and not the kind that play at Safeco Field in Seattle. And so how many more pilots will be coming through as part of this program, and how long is the program, and what other courses or programs are in store for the future?
With the pilots, it'll be all of them, so I guess another 52. And then this should proceed for another couple months at least. Every other week or so we'll do some training, and then after the pilots I hope to be able to use the simulation and the equipment here to start training navigation skills to mariners who are currently going to sea, using the facility here as a way to work individually with people to develop their navigation skills on the bridge. So for many people, the introduction of computers, especially to those that don't grow up with them, can be a dramatic change from the way we did the job previously. And rather than see the computer as a challenge, I'd rather see it as an advocate. So we kind of use it to take old skills and modify them to newer skills and to improve upon that.
I know from personal experience that when you're at sea, in a pleasure boat, for example, all hell can be breaking loose, and people might be on shore eating ice cream, walking around, the sun is shining, and you're out there and everything's going crazy. Lines are coming loose, things are snapping, etc. being at sea can be a very lonely experience, and I gather trying to pilot ships of this size can be challenging. I know with airline pilots, at least, there's a thing called air traffic control. So you're constantly being monitored as you fly across the country and across the globe, your position, and you're being assigned space and so forth. What's the equivalent at sea? Who knows who the heck knows you're there?
Well, I'm familiar with how things operate here in Puget Sound. We're in the business of risk management, and we work in partnership with the U.S. Coast Guard. They maintain a vessel traffic system which parallels what you refer to as air traffic control. It's not as detailed as air traffic control. They're more of an advisory service for those of us that operate here on the water. But we do have things that go wrong on ships, and as pilots, we're the first representative for the state of Washington that meets a foreign ship that's coming from another country. It's our job to stay on top of what's going on the ship. If we observe anything, that equipment that's broken, if it affects the navigation of the ship, we work with the Coast Guard to get it repaired. If the ship is unsafe to take to whatever port it's designated to go to, we'll take that ship to Anchorage to get the equipment repaired. So the parallel to the air traffic control that you mentioned would be the Coast Guard's vessel traffic system.
So I have to ask you, what was your most memorable experience as a pilot?
Well,
a good job.
You hope actually not to remember the job because that meant everything went routinely. But you remember those high wind jobs where it's a challenge with the tugs that you're assigned to do the job to keep things going safely. I don't have any one job that I remember over any others. It's a very challenging job, and it's a very rewarding job. It's one that I would encourage any future mariner here in training at the Port Townsend Northwest Maritime Center to seek. I have to say that the Puget Sound Pilots support what goes on here. We look forward to helping future generations of mariners grow up here at this facility, and it's our pleasure to participate.
And I should mention that at the Maritime Center here, during the Wood and Boat Festival on September 6th, 7th, and 8th, the pilot house here will be open for tours, and people can actually see what it's like to be standing on a bridge of a ship under different conditions, simulated fogs, and so forth. Gentlemen, captains, Captain Ed Marmol and Andy Crawford, thank you for talking with us about what it's like to be a pilot on Puget Sound. It was a pleasure having you on Boat Talk.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It was our pleasure. Thank you very much.